I know we have a few more people that are coming, so if you guys could be just give us a few more minutes. You guys can talk amongst yourself. It's really quiet in here. Even though it's a chapel, we're welcome to talk. So just a few more minutes. I know that we have another group that's coming, so we'll give them a few minutes. Thanks. I almost tripped coming up. Isn't that like every speaker's nightmare to trip coming up? But hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you. I'm ruining everything, guys. Thank you so much for spending your Friday night here with us. We're going to watch some Conan O'Brien after that. This is why my business partner is much younger than me, because he does technology. I do not. But hello, welcome. This is our first of hopefully many grief seminars. So let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Joy, and I have been in the funeral industry for, drumroll, 1 year. Which sounds a little crazy, but if we go way back in time, 30 plus years ago, when I took the aptitude test in high school of what I should be when I grew up, it said mortician. And I remember saying, like, who wants to be a mortician? Ew. And it took me 30 years to find it. And once I found this industry, I fell in love. I absolutely fell in love. I love working with the families. I love making loved ones look like themselves again. I love every part of the industry, and I feel so blessed that things have worked out for my partner and I to purchase Spring Creek. So Spring Creek is a little baby in Mortuary world. It's 5 years old, and we have been owners for 3 months. So my business partner is Taylor. Taylor, stand up. Everyone look in the back. See, he's technology. My ongoing joke is we're age and beauty, and unfortunately I'm age. So that's Taylor. He's wonderful. So the two of us came and we started Spring Creek 3 months ago, and it is really important for us. Our mission here is to create a safe space for people to come and celebrate and mourn, and a safe healing place where we can support one another. And so to me, it's bigger than just the funeral. I lost my mom 3 years ago, and then I lost my sister a year and a half ago. And I was actually doing my sister's makeup, and that's how I got the job. They offered me the job to start working. And to this day, I think she's taking credit upstairs. She's like, all of this is because of me. So I know that we have loved ones on the other side that are rooting for us to make this a beautiful space to help and bless the community. So again, thank you so much for coming and spending your evening here. I have two amazing speakers. You guys, I don't know how I got so lucky to get both of these women. They're amazing women. We're going to start with Ellen Meeks. And Ellen, actually, I met her at our first service that we did at Spring Creek. And we connected, and she has such a passion for helping and serving others, and she was really a driving force to make this night happen. So I want to thank her for that, but I wrote it down and I didn't bring my glasses, so bear with me. So I'm delighted to introduce Ellen. She's a dedicated mother, writer, powerful advocate for families facing serious illness. Ellen channels her passion into real action, having been deeply involved in supporting her niece through her 3-year battle with bone cancer. This challenging journey inspired Ellen to launch a website dedicated for raising funds for a cure for rare childhood cancers, making her work a powerful testament to finding purpose and meaning amidst profound difficulty. Today, Ellen is here to share her unique perspective on resilience, personal growth, and mindset, all invaluable lessons for navigating the complexities of grief. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Ellen. Thank you.
Well, let's see, is that good? Loud enough? Okay. All right, I'm curious, are there many people here from YouTube? No? Yeah? Couple people. Well, welcome. I'm just wanting to know that. Okay. This is my first time speaking at an event like this, so we'll see how this goes. My grief experience has actually been very solo. I've had to deal with grief a lot on my own, so this is kind of how it's evolved for me. And for me, my journey has really involved a lot of gratitude. So that's why I called it Living with Grief and Gratitude. So there's kind of two parts to this. I think some people are here to help those that have, that are grieving, like that you have someone in your life that lost someone, so you're here to help them. And then also there's people here that are in the deep of grief and trying to navigate that. So some parts will be for one and some will be for others, so I'll just kind of balance those. All right, and who I am, I think she described things, which thank you for that. That was my first time hearing that. So I'm here because basically my son passed away 16 years ago this month. So I'm a bereaved mother, so that's why I'm here speaking to you in front of about grief. But what I am not is I'm not a therapist. This is just my own personal journey and my own personal research and what I've discovered. So again, if I feel like I should do a disclaimer. So seek a professional, all that stuff if you need that. So I'm going to do my best to be accurate and just present the information that I've learned and that the way I understand it. And then she kind of mentioned about why am I the one up here presenting to you? Like she said, I met her at that funeral, and she said, I want to be involved in the community. And I was like, well, great. Have you heard about this study on grief and this study on grief and this study on grief? And your eyes got wide, and you're like, what? And you're like, would you like to speak? And I'm like, what? No, I don't want to talk to people about grief. I just want people to understand it. But just I had that feeling in my heart of, you need to share this, because for years, I've been thinking about having some sort of grief platform and sharing what I wish had been out there when I was going through it. It was back in 2009, because most of the research that is out there is way more current. Like a lot of it that I had access to was really old. So for me, my grief was the unexpected and sudden loss of a child. And so from what I've understood from talking to other people with grief is that the way that someone passes away does make a difference. If it's a parent figure that's lived a long life versus this like a long drawn out battle versus, a child or a sibling, and if it's sudden or if you have time to prepare. And so for me, part of my grief story is that it was sudden and that it was unexpected. Dang it. I feel like my grief is going to be like the Hulk. Like it's going to like be dormant. Like it's, like that. Have you seen that part in the movie where they're like, they talking to I forget the doctor's name. What's the doctor's name? The grief guy. No, not the grief. The Hulk. What's that doctor's name? What's his name? Banner? Bruce Banner. And, he's like on the ship, and they're like, well, what's your secret? And he's like, I'm always angry, right? I'm like, I'm always grieving. Like, I just am really good at shoving it down. So if it comes out, I might cry a little bit. I'll probably like do the ugly cry, and then I'll just push it back in and keep going. So just be aware that might happen, and I'm okay. So just to give some context, I was married before, and so when I mentioned like my husband currently, like when I mentioned my husband as part of my grief story, it will be my ex-husband. I'll probably say like my husband at the time, and so like it's my husband at the time, and so we're divorced, and he is off somewhere else, and so this is my lovely husband now. So that way you just kind of know the difference. But at least my grief story was that we had been married 4 years, my former husband and I, and we were finally having a child. I was super excited. And we were actually living out in really rural Nevada because he had this dream to build this house off-grid on these 10 acres he wanted to buy. And so how it was is that it was set up that I was teaching second grade at the time, and then I had our baby boy, his name was Garrett, and that he wasn't working, and he's like, well, I want you to go back to work, and so I'll watch the baby while you go back to work. And I really didn't want to, but he's like, well, please, will you do this? And I mean, really, with the way it was, there really wasn't much. I just kind of felt trapped. I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it for a year, and we'll go from there. And so, I went to work one day, and came home. And was met at the door. And now I did see there were cars and police cars at my house. I thought, what is going on? And I lived really remote, so I didn't really have a cell phone. I was met at the door to tell me he was gone. And I was completely shocked and confused because he was actually really big, like huge, healthy baby boy. He was 5 months old, and a 5-month-old at that time, they're usually starting to learn to roll over and kick and squirm. You can't, like a newborn, you can leave and walk away. But what had happened is, to make the story really short, is he had put the baby down on a nap, on an elevated surface, not strapped down, and left. And in the meantime, the baby had kicked and fallen and fell due to the injury. So it was an accident, a complete shock, nothing that I saw coming. So at least that's kind of the story in a nutshell. Let me see what's next here. Okay. And with that, at least for my experience too, is at the time, I didn't really realize it, but I was in also a really unhealthy marriage. And so that created a lot of complications with my own grief. At first we could mourn together, a lot of crying together, but within 2 weeks, the dynamic had completely changed. I felt guilty crying in front of him because he felt guilty because, he felt guilty and shame because it was his poor choices, even though I never made him feel like that. But it created more of a rift where I had to really hide my grief a lot. And I was hours away from any family. Like I said, we didn't really have a cell phone because we were so remote. And so that's for me where I really had to turn inward and just kind of figure out how to find my own way through my own grief. And so I was given a lot of books at that time, right? That's really common for people to give books. And one thing and I would say this is the one thing, I should give a disclaimer too, is everyone's experience with grief is different. And that I might say something that feels just right to you and you feel heard or seen, or I might say something that feels like really hurtful and offensive, or so just know that I'm just trying to tell my story just innocently from my spot and just hoping you all have healing and love. And if I say something that contradicts your experience, please forgive me. This is all really unique. Anyway, so if you do a basic, so this is where I'm going to kind of transition into what I was trying to learn, and this is what I wish was more common out there, is if you do a basic Google search of the stages of grief, I just did a screen grab, and this is what you're going to find, is the main basic stages. Like here you see, can you see that there? This is the Keebler-Ross stages of grief. And these are really great for when they came out in the 1960s. And if you do ChatGPT and ask about the stages of grief, you're going to get a similar thing. But these just weren't quite matching up, because what happened is, I think it was in maybe February or March, I remembered feeling, because my son died in October, I remember feeling so much worse, so much heavier, darker, more despair. And keep in mind, at this point, I'm back to work teaching second grade. I lived about an hour from the school, so I'm driving back and forth an hour, and pretty much the whole time I'm driving, I'm crying the whole entire time, because that way I'm alone, fixing my makeup, teaching, just putting on my happy face, which I loved being with the children. I loved that. That gave me purpose, being with them and their joyful faces. And I'd cry the whole way home, fix myself up, and then just go on with my, go on with the day. So as I'd read the books and different things, I was like, something isn't matching up. I am feeling worse. There's what is happening. And so just like, these are very common in our culture. But the tricky thing is, these were done for people that are facing their own death coming up, like those on hospice, those that are terminally ill. And so these are the stages that they often go through. And they weren't matching with my unique experience for why I was feeling worse and just like in more and more despair. And so, so it was March 2010. And so I went to the computer and I just started Googling research on grief. And it turned out that Yale had published a study in 2007. So this was just 2 years later that I'm researching this. And so like, this is pretty recent stuff compared to what was out there and what was typically published. And here is the biggest difference. Can this come off? Okay. I know people can't see it quite on YouTube, but here is the biggest difference, is yearning. Like, so there's some similarities, but yearning, and this was what really shocked me. This is the most intense negative emotion in grief according to the findings, and it starts to peak and get stronger around 4 months and, continues then. And so for me, I was like, oh, what I am feeling is normal. Like, just to know what I'm going through is typical, and that there wasn't something wrong with me, and that I wasn't like stuck in this. But this is a really big missing piece from the Kubler-Ross stuff, is this yearning, because of course you're not going to yearn for yourself when you're doing those studies. And so for me, this gave me just a lot of comfort to know, okay, this is okay, it's happening, and I just have to ride this wave of grief. It says, emotional protest peaks. The person most wants the loved one back. This is the most intense negative emotion in grief, according to the Yale study. And so it said that these go on typically, as the yearnings begin around 2 to 3 months, and then it said they usually peak at like 6 months is when it feels worse. And I forget what I was going to say about that, but that I think. Navigating that or realizing that would happen was shocking. I never heard anyone talk about how you're going to feel worse months after. And the really hard thing about this is usually around this time, 4 to 6 months, is usually when the people around you have like moved on, they're feeling better, they're like, okay, I think like we kind of tucked this away, and they like a lot of the support has dropped off, and then you're feeling worse. Like, I remember this time, like, I don't even know how I found clean clothes to wear. Like, I just couldn't, like, cooking for myself. I remember I lost weight, I couldn't eat, like, just these things that were just really hard to do, just kind of hit a peak there. Later, I found this study, and this is similar, and it breaks it down differently. The good news is, these you can easily find on Google, but for some reason, they're just not commonly known. And with this guy, he has a theory of attachment, and I wonder if I can find the phrase he said. He said, grief is not just sadness, it's an attachment reaction, which I feel like that makes more sense. It's because the relationship, like your ability to relate to that person or be attached to that person is what's compromised. And so I like how this one has a reorganization and recovery, because especially if a spouse has died, there's a lot of reorganizing your life and trying to figure that out. But this one has that too. And I think with this study, they really emphasize that you'll be in different phases. And of course, I think most of us know it's not linear. but you'll be in different phases from time to time. So I just had made this chart actually a while ago comparing the two. These have the overlapping of the strongest emotions. Sometimes there's anger, despair, but I think for me, understanding that it's gonna get worse before it gets better has really helped me know how to reach out to those that are still grieving or that grieve someone, because I, make a note. Okay, and then luckily we have, so I don't know, Angie, what year did you write this book? What year did the book come out? 2019. So this is my friend Angie, and she wrote this book, which I have over here. And when I read this book, I instantly loved it. So this book is about grief, and my big, dumb, invisible dragon is basically what I would call the feelings of yearning. And she has copies here. I won't go through it now because I want to make sure I get through my time. But basically, this boy in the story, his mom dies, and then this invisible dragon shows up and just ruins birthday parties. I remember that one's in the story, but ruins, Christmas, that the dragon comes and sits on his chest when he's trying to sleep. And so I thought that was just a really beautiful representation of the heaviness of grief that appears and just sits there and blocks your view from life, and that yearning that you have and how it just appears. And the ending is also really beautiful, and I feel like I'm trying to live the ending, where in the end he helps another girl face her invisible dragon. Excuse me. Okay. In the survey that Joy did, there's questions about wanting to know the types of grief. Since I'm not a therapist, I'm not going to go in detail, but luckily these can be researched, which is what I say here. It's very individual and take the time to research. Not every grief is the same at all. I think probably for most people, the simplest grief is when an elderly parent or grandparent passes away. That one gets the quickest closure. But then there's obviously very complicated griefs, or there's people that are masking their grief, or there's traumatic grief, or there's prolonged. So if I was dealing with grief or trying to help someone, I would probably go through and read about those. And you can do this on ChatGPT, because now that's around and it can summarize research a lot more. One book that I brought a couple. So just for fun, I checked out any books that were available at the Springville Library about grief. And there were a lot of them, and there were a lot available. So I'll go turn these in. I thought this was well done. It's Okay That You're Not Okay. This was written by a therapist who then lost her husband and then had a huge wake-up call to what it actually is like to grieve, and realized that she had said many misguiding things to her grieving patients, that after she'd gone through it, to realize that there were things that she was wrong about. So I felt like this book is really validating, because a lot of the culture out there is not caught up with what is truly going on in the heart. Speaking of heart, Atlas of the Heart, 100% recommend this book to everyone. This book is basically an encyclopedia of emotions. It describes joy, guilt, shame, grief, anguish. And what I've learned is as you can label your emotions, you can process them. And so in this book, she goes into more detail about grief with acute grief, integrated grief. So for me, one of my highest recommendations is that you do take the time to go and read, because that's what really helped and healed me. Okay, so to wrap up, I want to just say some things for those that are supporting those in grief. So this is, I think, one of the biggest things that I've heard is that what I've experienced too, is don't try to fix feelings or say something to make them feel better, which sounds a little odd, like don't say something to make them feel better, but I think this goes against validating, is what my experience is. So if it's like, oh, they're in a better place, or they're going to be in heaven, or they were too like sweet for this life, just like all these things that seem well-meaning can be hurtful. Like, well, if they were too sweet for this life, I guess they're too sweet to be raised by me. Like all these like negative things can happen of just like, well, they're not suffering anymore. It's like, so I think saying those things can cause a lot of hurt. So what I would do instead is let them sorrow and join them in their sorrow. And just be like, I'm so sorry, this hurts a lot, and just be there with that, because it's my experience that the thoughts that came to heal my grief were my own, were from me, or were from, I'm a person of faith, so just were from my Heavenly Father, from the Holy Ghost. And that's what really brought the healing, were those accompanying thoughts and the impressions that I got as I studied and read. Let's see, I would say ask them how daily tasks are going, especially 3 to 6 months out. When my son passed away, the Relief Society showed up and they took all my laundry and they did all my dishes, which sounds a little awkward, but at the same time I just was like, didn't know what to do. But then they showed up with all my laundry clean and they put it away, and I will just be forever grateful for that. So I'm not saying you should go do that, but ask how daily tasks are going. Be like, can I come clean your toilet? How's your toilet doing? Or, things like that. I would say check in, put in your calendar to check in down the road. If you're trying to support someone grieving, be ready to pivot, because there might be a day that they are not ready to do something you planned, or there might be a day they're like, I need you right now. I need this phone call right now. Be ready to listen, be ready to share memories. The unique thing with my life is that no one in my life right now really knew my son. I'm remarried. My family didn't see him very often because they were so far away. I have new children that never met him. And so this is something that I've just heard from other people is really helpful to share memories. But for me, when the days come that commemorate him, in some ways I feel very isolated. But that's just been part of my own journey. Know that you'll probably say something hurtful at some point, and just be ready to accept that you said the wrong thing and to apologize. And that's okay, because we're all going to say the wrong thing at some point. Calendar meaningful days like birthdays, death dates, holidays, and then don't take anything personal. If they don't answer a text, if they don't answer a phone call, if they don't answer the door, don't take it personal. Sometimes it's hard just to even pick up the phone and text back. For those that are grieving, take your time to heal. Obviously, it's been 16 years, and it still is a battle for me sometimes. But it does get better. It doesn't, consume my thoughts. Consume my thoughts like it did. And I think the number one thing too, or one of them, is if you don't feel it, you can't heal it. And so I think I just had to set aside time, and I have that. Allow a space to feel. I love crying in the shower. It's one of my favorite places to cry, because you're just washed there, and journal it. I didn't add this, but when my niece passed away, I made a playlist called Time to Cry Playlist, and that's all these really sad songs, like really sad, like When I Die Young or Tears in Heaven. And so sometimes I can just play it and cry. And sometimes my kids love to put it on and be like, are you gonna cry, Mom? And I'm like, seriously. And I'm like, you just wait till you guys live life, and then you'll know. That's all right. Take care of your body if you're grieving. Get what sleep you can. Gentle movement. Try not to be stagnant. Nutrition, supplements. Accept the help. Going through grief really gave me the opportunity to be able to be like, yeah, I'll take the help, whereas before I would have said no. If you're ready to be caught off guard when you're going to cry, I already said research about grief. Lean into what helps and reject what doesn't. If you're reading a book about grief and it doesn't sit right, reject it, put it down. Connect with those that have similar grief. That's been a blessing for me, is to connect with those that have had children pass away, because that is a unique grief. And things that I was going through alone, when I'm able to talk to other grieving moms, I don't feel as alone as I used to. And so that's been a huge blessing. Or things that I've forgotten were part of my grief journey. I'm reminded as I talk to other grieving moms. Brain fog, I remember forgetting a lot. So please, for people that are grieving, they're gonna forget a lot. Or just, I remember being in teacher meetings after my son died, and just sitting there and they would turn to me and I'd be like, I have no idea what you just said, I'm so sorry. It does get better. And then forgive when ready, meaning there are definitely people that have said things to me that were hurtful, then I know they didn't mean to, and so just, I've had to learn to forgive them and just know that I don't want to carry that with me. I can forgive knowing they didn't mean to hurt me, but move forward. In closing, I want to say this quote that I found in this book, Atlas of the Heart. Grief does not obey your plans or your wishes. Grief will do whatever it wants to you, whenever it wants to. In that regard, grief has a lot in common with love, because love will hit us anytime, and so will grief. I do want to share real fast that for me, in my darkest time, the thing that saved me from grief was actually gratitude. Even though I was so sad my son was gone and I was childless again, I was so grateful that I'd had him and that I'd been a mom for 5 months. And so for me, finding gratitude that I got to experience that love was what really kept me from the real despair, even though I was grieving. So I hope this has been helpful, and thank you for being here, and that's it. Let me know if you have any questions another time.
I just have to say, you guys, her first time, that took so much courage, so thank you so much. All right. And I'm sure, because I know a lady, that I can get a copy of those slides, and so if you'd like to talk to me, then I'll work with Ellen about getting the copy of the slides. I know some people in the back, it was difficult to see. Thank you so much, Ellen, for sharing your story. That's so brave. I feel like when we're brave enough to open up and share our vulnerabilities of our grief, it creates a safe space for others to do the same. So thank you. Our next speaker is one of the sweetest ladies I've ever met in my life. I had the opportunity to work with Ganel-Lyn in her mother-in-law's funeral. That's how I met her, as I was lucky enough to meet her whole family and serve her family by serving her sweet mother-in-law. And I feel like it has been such a gift and blessing for me to know this sweet lady. Now I mostly just follow her on social media, so that's where I get content from her. But it's an absolute honor to introduce Ganel-Lyn, a speaker and author known globally for her powerful blend of honesty, authenticity, and a motivational spirit. She understands the journey of healing personally, having navigated chronic illness and the unimaginable grief following the suicide loss of her beloved sister. Ganel-Lyn has committed her life to prevention and empowerment, sharing principles that have encouraged thousands to rebuild their lives. Please join me now in welcoming a voice of resilience, Ganel-Lyn.
I am so grateful to be here. Joy came into my life very unexpectedly earlier this year. My mother-in-law was 91, and so that's just a graduation, let's be honest. And she had 2 weeks on hospice. She led the music the last day she was healthy at church, and wanted to have her services at Nelson's, which is where Joy was working at the time. And at Thanksgiving, now a year almost, we had a chance to have a family meeting. And we sat her down and had her plan most of her funeral, which was super effective because I'm the daughter-in-law. I don't even know why I was the one that went in and talked to Eric that she was still alive. And really, I was just sharing with Joy's aunt, who's been my friend forever and ever and ever, that my husband had been the child that had done all the estate work and all the help of fixing the computers and guarding from spam, you know, when she would get punked by people, for 21 years, because my father-in-law had passed of MS. And so really me stepping in was really vulnerable. And I think that's something that if we had talked, I do a lot of work in this space. In January, I was already back in therapy for my father, who is in bed and aging and in another state. And I remember walking in and talking to Eric, and I was like, I'm the in-law. I don't even know why I'm here. There's 6 kids. Why am I the one getting this planned? And I know why, because I'm the planner. And I was trying to help my husband. That's not all the grief that I've experienced. And what I love about a gathering like this is grief shows us what we love. And I love what has already been shared tonight. There may be some overlap, but I do grief camps for youth and a lot of faith-based grief conversations. As was shared, 12 years ago, my 40-year-old sister died by suicide. It is a very unique kind of grief. When I was 10, my 2-year-old sister died. So I have 2 sisters buried by each other. I had a father-in-law that had MS and watched him battle for years and years, and that was a release for him. I held my grandma in bed as she battled breast cancer 7 times and held her while she took her last breath. And so I would just say that what I'm going to talk about today, I hope adds to what's already been shared, but does it in a way that, especially for those that have children or teens in their life, where you're maybe trying to navigate grief, but you're also trying to have conversations with people that aren't ready to have it. When my mother-in-law passed away, it was very interesting. I went to therapy one day. She hadn't died yet. And I have 2 brother-in-laws that are doctors. I thought my sister-in-law may show up here, but doctors have a very specific lens of life. That's their career of fixing and saving. And they had sat at that Thanksgiving dinner meeting where Mom planned everything, right? And we watched them be very logical about this. And yet both of them professionally watch families lose people. And it was interesting to see how each child showed up differently. And my therapist said, what's hard about when a parent dies or when siblings are all involved is that it brings up that child part of them, no matter how it is. And you're all on an island grieving together in a family, and no one can help each other really, because we're all kind of floating on the same grief island. There's not a lot of in the well to share with each other. And that was super helpful for me because hurtful things were said and done, and we made it through, and overall it was a beautiful service, and it was wonderful, and it was a graduation. But I think that's a really important thing that I just this year recently experienced. And then after her passing, for the next 6 weeks, I think I was at 3 funerals at Nelson's. And Eric, who was, at the funeral helping with directing and planning Mom's funeral, said, do you know everyone dying? And I said, I think I do. And by March, I was like, done, God, I am not going to any more funerals. And so we're going to talk about that in a way today that I think has helped me the most in talking to high schoolers and junior high, all the way up to adults that are not sure why they're acting the way they're acting that day. So what we're going to talk about are the chairs of grief. And when I do this at a camp, I literally put chairs up front, and we have all the different chairs of grief. But for our YouTube friends, I'm just going to pretend this is a big chair. I think that the first thing that's important is this is the chair of anger. What I would like you to visualize is when you loved, maybe you didn't love playing musical chairs growing up, or maybe you play it as an adult. I'm not judging you if that's your fun thing to do at a family party. But I didn't always love playing that game. It kind of stressed me sometimes because my child got hurt one day at church playing musical chairs in nursery and broke his leg. And so maybe there was just this sense of this is kind of dangerous. There's metal chairs and we're pushing each other to get a seat. But if you can kind of visualize chairs, we're going to talk about 4 of them. But I do love Atlas of the Heart. There could be a lot more chairs. I am grouping all the feelings of all the different chairs for that visual that when you're playing musical chairs, there's movement. And when you're grieving, there's movement. And you get to notice when you're sitting in one chair too long. And so if you can go with me on a metaphor, I have an elementary ed degree with a minor in psychology, so I'm not a licensed therapist, but I will say that a metaphor for me is the most helpful when all the emotions, and I love what you shared about the Hulk showing up, there's a metaphor that usually helps ground me. And so I hope this metaphor works with you months from now or years from now, in your own grief today, and in a neighbor or a friend that may be wondering why they're stuck in a chair. So the first chair is anger. As was shared, my 40-year-old sister died by suicide. And I think there's something important to know about suicide. I do a lot of suicide prevention, education, and work, and I talk a lot about the intersection between faith and mental health, which 12 years ago when she passed, there wasn't as much as there is now. I wrote my very first book. I have 20 books published, and my very first book, I thought there would be one book. And it's titled, I Can Do Hard Things with God. And the very first chapter is Meg's story. When I started writing it, she was still alive. And it was interesting because it's a compilation book of different people's hard things. And I had approached 2 different people that had lost a loved one to suicide, and they both pulled out. They couldn't write about it. And so when I submitted the first manuscript, Meg was still alive, and she really wanted the book published. And while the publisher was reviewing it, Meg died. And 6 weeks after her passing, they called and said, we want to publish this and anything else you're going to write, which I didn't think I was going to write anything more. And I think that's a really interesting thing because that story hadn't happened yet, and her story had to be in there. And I hadn't replaced the suicide topic with any other story. I had just kind of let it go and realized that there was a unique way that grief shows up when suicide is the loss. Now, I've probably spoken at 3,000 different events in the last 10 years, literally all over the world, in the Middle East to England to Canada to all over the United States. And suicide there's not a cool way to talk about it. There's not a clinic or a workshop you can go to where all of a sudden it feels less yucky. But what I've learned, especially post-COVID, is that all of us either know someone that struggles with mental health or are struggling ourselves. And most of the groups that I've spoken to, no matter where it is, has lost someone to suicide. It is a very unique grief. And I can say that I have had different griefs. I have lost people I love that feel like graduations, and unexpected babies dying, and friends that died in drunk driving accidents and overdoses, and all the kind of grief. And there's a unique grief about suicide that is very much triggering of what if. We start to think we can fix that. And there's a lot of, if you've seen those videos on YouTube where they line up all the dominoes in those really cool patterns, and then they're supposed to be satisfying, right? That's what the kids call them, they're satisfying videos. And then you touch one domino, and then it does this beautiful, cool, right? The issue with a lot of grief, and especially with suicide loss, is we think in our brains, if we can replay, and I can tell you the stories of the months before Meg died. She had had a lifetime of dealing with mental health struggles, addiction, and learning disabilities. She had been sexually abused as a child. And so I had watched as her big sister get really strong and healthy and positive, and then she would fall into what I call the pit. And we had done that cycle so many times. So if you have loved ones, that this is your big fear. It was our biggest fear. It was my worst case scenario. And it happened. I'm the big sister. Who else is oldest children here? Raise your hand if they would just listen to us. Am I right? Right? Yeah. And so my grief was this kind of nightmare, kind of older sister with a mother that deals with mental health stuff. So this was my fear playing out. And I remember thinking certain things that we had always tried. We had done the therapy, we had done the stuff, right? So going back to that domino analogy is, especially with suicide grief, there's this tendency to think if we could go just move one domino. If we could just go back in time and move that one little domino, make a phone call, show up at someone's house. My sister lived in another state, so it was always like phone calls, texting, and mailing things. And the last few weeks of her life, she stopped answering the phone. I mailed her a card. I didn't know until I packed up her apartment if she had opened the mail, because she had stopped kind of functioning in that daily way. And so I bring this up because the anger chair was very often associated with a trauma response. I would have nightmares. And I've worked through this feeling lots of times with her, and she's been gone 12 years, and she feels like she's my partner. Her story has been told all over the world, hundreds and thousands of times, of lots of platforms. And because of her story and our family's story, I get to hear from people that know her because of me and make different choices in their own mental health journey. That's incredible. But recently, about a year ago, when my dad started to take a turn, anger came back up. My parents divorced and remarried, and so I have siblings still alive, but we're all halves, and that's great. I've changed all their diapers. They're my babies, right? I'm their mama. But Meg and I came from this family that is no longer. And now that my dad's getting older, I've gotten angry again because it's been really messy and tough. And so I share that with you because sometimes we think anger is like that grief only shows up as sad, and it doesn't. But why I'm giving you the analogy of musical chairs is you're not stuck. There's no locked-in seatbelt. You get to notice that you're there. You get to allow yourself to have those feelings. And you get to decide what support looks like if you're spending too much time here. I remember one day feeling anger after she had passed, and it manifested at the Walmart parking lot. Because I was just like, why can't I find a parking spot? And it had been 4 months. I love that you said that, because I remember talking to my best friend that day, and I was like, this is not grief. She's like, okay. And I'm like, it's not grief. I don't know what this is, but that's not what it was. And it was just this irritation, anger, and I wanted to grab the mic of the PA system at Walmart and be like, does everybody know that there's a person not alive anymore on the earth? Like, why are y'all acting all normal? That's irrational. Of course, that poor mom with her 3 kids trying to get her groceries does not need to hear me on the PA system. But I was feeling this anger, and it was manifesting first in trying to find a parking spot. And then once I walked into the store and everyone was acting normal, I just wanted to shake everyone and say, do you know who's not here? My sister loved a good road trip. She loved a good dance party. And she loved me fiercely. And so I planned her funeral, and so I hired a DJ at the funeral. We had a dance party. The older people at that funeral were like, what are we doing? And I have one sister that hadn't really cried. She hadn't shown a lot of emotion in the weeks before the funeral. And we're dancing at this dance party. And we're ironically dancing to Happy by Pharrell Williams. Do you remember this song 12 years ago? And my sister Amy loses her mind. She's like sobbing hysterically as we're dancing at a funeral. I mean, we had the church, so, right? And we're dancing to Happy. It was the weirdest moment for her. And she looks at me and she's dancing, and I remember she's sobbing. She's like, why am I crying right now? And I said, because Meg loved a good dance party. So I bring that up because everyone there was having their own emotion and their own feeling. And everyone in my family has not written books and done workshops and spoken all over the world about Meg and her mental health and faith and all of that. We've all processed very differently. My brother found her on my mom's birthday. There's nothing good about that story. And I can tell you there's certain family members that still haven't moved out of this chair. They're still kind of stuck here. And they haven't reached out to support. So I'm going to tell you about 4 chairs, and I'm going to give you a tool. I believe in a big toolbox. So I love books, and I love books being in a toolbox. I love workshops. I think that's a good tool in a toolbox. I love community, all of these things. My biggest tool for this one is therapy. I'm a super fan of therapy. Now, I know there's a lot of people in every group I speak to that goes in their heads, I've tried it, and they're crazy, and I'm never going to therapy again. Totally validate that. Have you ever had a bad haircut? Yes. I hope everyone's had a bad haircut. If you've been on the earth more than 3 years, we don't stop getting our hair done, right? We usually crowdsource it. So this is what my little tip is on the tool of therapy. There is 20 to 30% therapists out there that are amazing, and usually they have a wait list. There's 20% or so that probably should not be therapists. And you may have had the joy of meeting with them. And maybe you've seen them arrested. You know what I'm saying, hypothetically? I mean, that unfortunately happens, okay? But there's this middle chunk. About 40 to 50% of the therapists out there, they're not perfect, they're not amazing, and they're not horrible, and they're enough. And it's okay that you're paying someone that you're not married to, that you didn't birth, that you don't work with, to hear some of your feelings, especially in this chair. I also tell people, and my kids, I think everyone in our family's in therapy right now, which I love. I'm a bragger about that, because to me, therapy is education for our relationships and our hearts and our minds. And I think we've worked to demystify that it's not always a crisis response. I'm not in crisis, and I'm in therapy right now, right? I'm a middle-aged, empty nesting woman that had a professional change and identity shift about a year ago and have aging parents. I don't know what I'm doing, okay? Everything's a hot flash and confusing to me right now. And so I pay someone to talk to me and hear me and validate me, and I'm fine with that. But one of my kids that's in therapy I always say, it's 3 appointments you'll know if it's a good fit. This is not supposed to be your best friend. This is supposed to be someone that kind of pushes you and triggers you. And one of my children got to the 3 or 4 appointment level and was like, I'm not. And I knew exactly, because this child had told me what her therapist had said. And I was like, that therapist is right on the money, and she's triggering you a little bit, and she was going to quit. And I said, that's fine, you can quit, because I believe in finding a new hair person if you need to, okay? But go to her and tell her you don't think this is working and she's not hearing you, and you're going to make a change. That shows therapy is working. If you can tell your therapist you're done going to them. So she went one more time in, and it was fine. And she's still going, right? So that's my tip for that tool. Therapy is one way in which you process anger. I think exercise is a beautiful way as well, okay? Notice how long you sit in this chair. If you're there too long, it can start to affect other relationships in your life quickly. So that's the first chair I want to talk about. This author unknown said, I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her real name was grief. That's it. Grief shows us what we love, and anger is grief. It's all of that. The next chair, I'm going to just see if I might need help. Can you, thank you, Vanna.
That's right.
Okay. Sadness. Now, I'm going to talk about my mother-in-law at 91 dying in February. Felt like a beautiful, joyous celebration. I don't know if the last 3 years of holidays, she didn't at least say once to me, why am I still here? Right? She had hit that point. She'd been alone. My father-in-law had died 21 years before. That was a really important time for her to find herself, where she wasn't caring for a man that had MS. She wasn't caring for kids, but it's lonely. It's lonely. And so I share with you that I miss her. And it was a complicated relationship. Joy knows this. Joy was so good. I mean, she passed in February, and we didn't have a funeral till March, and my son was very worried because she had been on hospice. And it was like, we're waiting how long for Grandma's funeral and an open casket? What? I said, Joy's going to do it. Joy looks so beautiful. Joy made her look so beautiful. I hadn't seen her that pretty in years. But I wasn't feeling sad. I have felt sad a couple weeks ago when one of our favorite shows we would talk about started its new season, and I couldn't call her, right? There's moments of that. But I remember the sadness chair shows what I love, right? And so as you were sharing, it helps you to create new reattachment. The reason I bring up my mother-in-law as an example of the sadness chair is my niece. She's struggling a lot more. She has 4 little kids. Mom got sick that night after her 4th baby's baby blessing. And she's not handling it. And I will be honest with you that I've been a little frustrated sometimes. Like, what more did you want Grandma to do? Like, she had made key lime rolls till she couldn't make any more key lime rolls for us. right? She had crocheted everything, quilted every blanket, led the music the Sunday she passed. She deserves to graduate. And then I have to hear myself and my own advice. That chair, that sadness chair for my niece is really one that she kind of hovers in a little bit more because of her own story with grandma and what she wanted to do still with grandma. One of the things I'll say about the sadness chair and grief is Meg died 12 years ago, but new grief shows up. So when we say we're getting better, all I would say to you is the grief chair gets bigger. And have you met those people that have never grieved before about anything? And we're talking today about loss of a person, but we can grieve a loss of a job, our health, our identity, lots of things. I hope these chairs come to your mind when you're grieving something that may have nothing to do with someone passing. And so as I watch my niece struggle to get out of the sadness chair, I've thought, isn't that interesting? The sadness chair, there's new things I'm sad about. Both my kids aren't married, and in my faith, I'll believe that mom gets to be there. But I know both of them are sad that she won't be able to make the baby blessing dresses, or the new quilts, or the new wedding dresses, all the traditions, right? And so I think I have to have some empathy that maybe I'm not in a sad chair, but maybe someone close to you is kind of stuck there. Now, traditionally speaking, when we see someone stuck in the sad chair, that shows up in some lack of function in their daily life, right? Where it gets harder to do some of the things. And we, I think, assume that if someone's grieving, they're looking like they're sad all the time. And the reason I brought up anger first is because grief looks like other things. It doesn't always look like sad. That's why that day when I called my friend, I said, this isn't grief. And she was like, okay, cute. My husband was unemployed at the time. My son was in high school and struggling. And my sister had just died all in 3 months. And so, yes, there's feelings that sometimes the sad because of someone's loss triggers the sad of something else. I love this quote. You cannot prevent the birds of sorrow from flying over your head, but you can prevent them from building nests in your hair. It's an old Chinese proverb. And that's another way of saying you can sit in the sad chair. Don't sit there so long that the nest gets built, right? Because what I've come to know is music, and I love the playlist idea. Sometimes I know I'm sad and I'm not accessing that feeling, and a good sad movie or a song will allow you to sit in that chair and then move out of the chair. Sometimes I sit in the sad chair and I don't even want to admit that that's where I'm at, and I'm not sure how to access those feelings, especially if you're a parent and you're grieving a child's parent. Or you're a parent and you're grieving another child in front of your children and you're watching them and they're watching you. One of the things I would say is the night we found my sister had passed, my son was a teenager, and about 5 years previous, we had lost our family dog. Our dog had been hit and killed, and it was my son's dog. And it was interesting to me, in his teenage brain, he said, oh, I know exactly what you're feeling. I felt that way when Cole died. Now, in my heart, I was like, it's not the same thing as losing my sister, but I'll give you that. And what I would say is we're having a very human experience. And you may be traveling along a road with people that have never been in a mortuary. When we had mom pass, I was very used to dressing a body and being a part of that process. None of the sisters and sister-in-laws had. And it was very interesting to me because my two sister-in-laws, her daughters, are older than me. And I thought, isn't this interesting that we assume we're in a one-room schoolhouse, and sometimes the kindergartners up front say the awkward things, and you're the senior in the back learning algebra. And you're like, why are you saying such an insensitive thing? They're just learning their ABCs, and they haven't had this experience yet. And so the sadness may show up, and you may be thinking, why aren't you over that? Which is kind of what I realized. My niece said to me one day, I know, Aunt Ganel, you're happy that mom graduated. I'm just not there yet. And that's okay. It's not okay if as a young mom she's not able to function, right? Then we get to have a different conversation. So for my mother-in-law, music was a really important thing. She led the music the day she got sick. So we surprised everyone at the funeral. It was so great, right? It was so great. And her little organist from church was the organist at the funeral, and we put Mom on the big screen, and she led I Am a Child of God for the whole, and no one knew it was coming except the family. And they were a little like in shock and emotional, and it was joyful. And she had picked the music she wants sung at the funeral. And so I think music is a really powerful way of saying the things we don't have the words to say, and feeling the feelings we don't have the feelings always accessible to us. So the tool I would suggest for your sadness share is music. The next one is faith. Now I'm going to just say this one really quickly. After Mom died, a few weeks later, a longtime family friend who was our family doctor had a son that's the same age as my son, and he had a drug addiction. And he died of an overdose. And it was horrific. And Tyler, and Nelson's did that funeral, and Tyler had been adopted by my friend and his wife, who were then, they were divorced and he had remarried. And he had found his birth mom later in life, and his birth mom spoke at his funeral. And what I remember feeling from that funeral is there's nothing about suicide and I think addiction that feels joyful. There's not a way to piece it apart and be like, okay, here's the happy news about addiction. And addiction can rob you of your person, even before they pass. They're not them, right? But what stood out to me the most is his dad, who had been our friend and family doctor since my son was 9 months old, stood up and talked about how he had seen God in all of Tyler's life. Now, whether or not for you faith means God or religion, I believe that 12-step does a beautiful job of saying there's got to be something bigger than you out there. And maybe that's just gravity. Maybe it's just that somehow the sun comes up every single day, and that's bigger than you. I think for me, I don't know another way to do life without faith. And so for me, when I sat at Tyler's funeral, and there was so much about it that could have been just heart-wrenching, they sang Christmas music, and it was not Christmas. And so I came home from that funeral and told my husband, because I'm a Christmas music girl. By the way, 103.1 started playing this week, Christmas music. I know, you're welcome. If you hate that, then just scroll on by. You don't even have to listen, but I just think I want to be that confident that I'm a radio station in October that starts playing Christmas music. Tyler wanted Christmas music at his funeral because they knew that brought him so much joy. It was his favorite song. And it was a Christmas song. And so you may find faith in a totally different way. Let me just say this. If for you faith equals God, and you're kind of angry at him right now, and you call him a him, that's okay. He's big enough for your anger. He's big enough for your flat feelings where you're not sure he's there. He's big enough for your sitting in the anger chair and the sad chair too long. I like to tell people that, if you're grieving or dealing with mental health struggles and you cannot hear or feel God, then that is when you trust the people around you that you trust. I always feel like it's a thick screen where I know there's love out there and faith out there, but it's not getting through. If you're dealing with some chronic depression or grief, it can be hard to feel that part of God in your life. And so you may have to shake it up a little bit and how faith shows up. Maybe it's for you like it is for me walking my dog Ruby Jane, right? If I have to take her out, then I have to move my body, and then I have to see the leaves, and then I feel God. Or for me, the last 2 years, it's learning to make sourdough, and then I pray and I ask God who needs my sourdough, and I take them sourdough. So faith can be a lot of things. It can be service, it can be music, it can be prayer, it can be no prayer, it can be going to church, it could be not going to church. It could be being in the mountains. It can be a lot of things. But my suggestion to you is that for me, faith is most supported by my meditation and my journaling. Because it gets all messy in here, and I can't even tell what I'm feeling anymore about things. And I have to write the journal that you are never going to read. I burn them, and I throw them away, and they are never shown to any posterity. There's another journal that's like, today I got to go to Spring Creek Mortuary and be with Joy, and it was super great. My kids can read that story. I'm talking about this other journal. It's a special one, where I write, Dear Heavenly Father, and I just say all the things until I start to feel something. That's my tool suggestion for faith. Maybe it's going to synagogue or mass. Maybe it's serving other people for you. But for me, prayer journaling has been the most effective, because sometimes I kneel down to pray and I have no words left. There's nothing to say. And I get tired of my same old prayers, by the way. So I hope this chair, faith, is part of your grief. I think even if you don't have a religion or an understanding of God, there's got to be something bigger than you, because this mortal life stuff is a lot. And I talk to a lot of people in their grief. This is when they find their faith again. They're reaching for something that has to make sense when everything doesn't make sense when you're grieving. And to me, that's one of the gifts of grief, is faith. What is said in Alcoholics Anonymous or in 12-step is the serenity prayer. And I think I have said it so many times the last 12 years with lots of situations. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It's the wisdom to know the difference stuff, right? Especially if you're grieving alongside others that you're watching do it in a different way. They're stuck in the anger and the sad chair, and you're like, hey, just come to church with me and let's pray about this. And that's not working for them. That's where you get to surrender. And you get to show how you're processing your grief. I have siblings that are stuck. And for me, as the big sister, I want to tell them, faith is the chair you got to spend some time in. Why aren't you hanging out in the faith chair a little bit more? Because me and God, that's how we get through stuff. They're not there yet. They can't handle that. They're in a lot of pain, and they're in a lot of anger, and they're not quite there yet. And that's okay. You keep spending some time in the faith chair, and the people around you will be like, oh, I noticed you're in that chair a lot. And what's that about for you? Because that one is prickly for me. I don't really like faith. And then you get to have an opportunity to take that grief as a gift. The last one is joy. Don't you love that Joy gets to put joy up here? The reason I talk about joy with grief is we don't talk about joy with grief. When you look at all the research and the studies, there's not a lot of talk about the joy part, because it feels very counterintuitive and opposite. But the other day I spoke to a whole bunch of deans at BYU, and this woman pulled me aside and talked about grief of her health and not being able to do the things she used to be able to do because she also has lupus. And she can't play the music anymore because of her arthritis. And she's like, what's wrong with me? I have all these other fulfilling things in my life. And I said, there's nothing wrong with you. She's like, but I've processed and I've gone to therapy and I've done all the things, but I get angry. I'm in the anger chair sometimes, and I'm in the sad chair when people just get up there and play the organ. They don't even act like they care. What's wrong with me? And I said, oh, that's joy. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, you don't want to get to the point where music doesn't mean joy for you, right? She's like, no. And I said, the problem is if you were playing a harp, which I am not a harpist, or a guitarist, the string of joy is very close to the sad string. And sometimes we think we're only plucking the joy string, and then all of a sudden you're crying. Anyone else have that experience? You're in the happiest moment, you're at the pumpkin patch with your kids, and all of a sudden you are plucking the sad string. And you're like, wait, this was a happy moment. What are we doing? So I said to her, the sad string is right next to the joy string. And so when you feel the joy of music and it happens to trigger the sad, that's a sign that you're loving something. It's not a sign that you're stuck. Now, I said, if you start throwing tomatoes at the organist on Sunday because you don't get to play the piano or the organ, then we may need to use a tool like therapy, right? We may need to process this grief a little bit deeper, but it's okay if the sad string gets plucked with the joy string. My sister Bonnie died when I was 10, and she was under the age of 2. She had a heart condition that, fast forward, I'm married, I'm a woman, I'm a lady with adult responsibilities, and I'm driving in San Diego, and the news comes on that Sylvester Stallone's baby's born with the same heart condition. And now they have technology to fix that. I had not cried about Bonnie forever because she was just like this magical, perfect person that probably shouldn't have stayed in our family too much longer because we're a bit crazy. You know what I'm saying? And I just felt like she was a gift for us to show us what goodness feels like. And that's how the nurses felt that took care of her. But all of a sudden there was this feeling of like, what? I'm happy Sylvester Stallone's daughter has grown up to be an adult, but all of a sudden I was like, what's that about? But then I started to remember all these little moments. That moment of sad turned into this joy. And I don't think you should ignore the sad. I think you should let yourself feel those feelings. But once in a while, do you notice that you don't go to the joy next? You just stop at the sad? Because you're afraid. If I go to the joy, then I'm going to be sad again. And that's true. Those strings are right by each other. But then I started listing all the joyful memories we had of her and why she made our family better and why she reminded me so much of all the good things in the world. And I got a chance to know her. Fast forward, many years later, I welcomed my daughter after 6 years of trying to have a baby. And they handed her to me, and I felt a same feeling. And it was the feeling I felt when I would hold baby Bonnie. Now that freaked me out a little bit because I knew what Bonnie had come to earth with. And later, within a few weeks, we found out my daughter had some health stuff. But that same joy, that same goodness, that same light, she's 21 now, and she walks in her room, and it's that same joy that I remember feeling at 10 with my little sister. My Nana that I held in bed when she died, we were not even blood related. She was my step-grandma. But she married my grandpa before I was born, and she would come on her lunch breaks from work to hold me. And she had never had kids of her own. And everywhere we would go in public, people would be like, oh, you look just like your mom. And she'd go, I'm her grandma. And we were no blood related, which was just cute. And she just had the best shoes and the best clothes. I still have her robe and 2 of her sweaters that have held up. And she taught me how to decorate a table and write a thank you note. And she loved the fall. There's so many moments where I am so grateful. I can pull out that little white pitcher she used to serve us milk in and serve it to my kids. I'm so grateful that I still write a thank you note, put a stamp on it, and it gets mailed to 2 houses down in my neighborhood. Because who wants just junk mail? Nobody. Am I right? That's from my grandma. And so in closing, I just want you to know that for me, those joyful memories are so crucial and sacred and beautiful. If we can take a minute, I would love for anyone that's here that wants to, that has lost someone, what is a joyful memory about that person that you'd like to share with our group that we can share in that joy? And it's okay if the string of sad gets plucked while you talk about the joy. Yes, friend.
I was just thinking of Marvin's mum, because she stayed with us and lived with us for a period of time before she passed. But one of my favourite experiences with her was when I would care for her in her days and every morning get her ready. We would always play records, and playing the records we would sing together as we would get her ready for the day.
I love that. For those that couldn't hear, she cared for her aging mother-in-law, and they would play records when she was helping bathe her and take care of her. And I love that joyful memory. I love that. Anyone else want to share a joyful memory of someone they've lost that's passed? Joy.
So my mom actually had dementia, and so when she passed, it was a graduation, like you said. So, but while she had dementia, it was during COVID, and she couldn't be in a nursing home and understand why she couldn't leave. So she ended up going home, and my daughters were able to be her caregiver, and they went 6 days a week. That's one of them. And they went 6 days a week, and they would get her dressed and do her makeup, and then they would go on drives and get food and do dance parties. And just on TikTok the other day, there's a TikTok of my mom and one of my daughters dancing.
I love that.
And it still just brings so much joy, and I feel like all of my daughters, because even though it was a difficult thing that they went through, they have so much joy because they have these deep memories with her that a lot of the other grandkids don't have.
Thank you. I did a couple of grief clinics this summer with youth, teens, and I asked that question, and this young man raised his hand and he said, "My dad died." and he really loved this certain team. So I bought a whole bunch of jerseys, and he happened to be wearing. And so he talked about how much his dad loved this team. And then he was really stoic. But as he kept talking about how much his dad loved this football team, the tears came. And I think it's such a beautiful gift that our hearts are still soft. I think there's so much in life that can make them hardened. And if I spend too much time in certain chairs and I don't get the support I need to move through them, then I don't get to sit in the joy chair. And I think one of the most beautiful things we have a chance as the holidays approach, it can be a tricky time for grief. I have all of my sister's ornaments because she never had children of her own. And so my family knows that there's this one little box of every time I get to put her ornaments on the tree. Some of them I remember because we got them as kids together and we get to talk about. And sometimes it's too hard and sometimes it's too painful. But what I'm grateful for is that I want to remember that joy, especially when it's in the wake of suicide. It's one decision someone makes, how they pass with suicide. And sometimes, especially with suicide, we go into shame as the survivors, and we don't want to talk about it. In our family, we talk about it. But I want people to know there was so much about Meg, not just the way she died. She loved me fiercely, and she loved watching Dancing with the Stars. So I can't really watch that because her and my mom did that thing. And so it's back on right now, and I keep seeing all this content about it, and I realize that's their thing, their joyful thing. And one day my mom says, I don't feel her around me a lot. And I said, Mom, then maybe you start to notice the ways you are feeling her. When you see a Dancing with the Stars video, let's give that credit. I know for me, my grandma loved owls, so anytime I see an owl, that's when I feel her close. And when Happy comes on the radio, I turn it up and I start singing Happy, and then it turns into sad, and then it goes back to happy again, just like my sister Amy experienced. Grief is itself medicine. William Cowper said that. And I hope that tonight, something that was shared with you allows your grief chair to get bigger. That if you notice you're spending too much time in one of those chairs and you need some support, that you will find ways in your toolbox to move through them. Because that movement, that's beautiful life. And our loved ones want us to keep moving and living. And when we do that, we show honor and love. And we also allow our movement through grief to be an example for those around us that may be stuck. I made a copy. I did not create this, and some of them have double printing because I didn't turn off the double printing, and so you get to do it twice. So if you get the double-sided one, maybe it's because you're going to mess up on the first side. These are 5 tools to help. It's a self-care. It's a lot of what Ellen and I have talked about today. But more specifically, number 3 is that skills box. I hope something tonight that was shared, you can add it to your box. I hope that as I love also crying in the shower, giving yourself permission, especially if you're trying to still be an adult, that you give yourself grief time where it looks like the sad chair and that you're crying, and you give yourself permission to be angry and you get support for that, so that you can also feel the faith and the joy that comes with grief. So I will leave those here if you want to take those and share it with someone else, or you keep it in a file for when you might need to come up with a plan. And thank you for sharing your humanness with me tonight, and your hearts with me, and your grief with me. I love that we love, and I love that grief reminds us what we love. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful, powerful night. I really appreciate everybody coming and spending this time together. I feel like often in grief we can feel very alone, and so I'm really grateful that you're all here tonight to support one another. A few things coming up. I do have a therapist who has volunteered to do a group therapy for grief. We will be hosting that here at the Mortuary once a month. If that's something that you are interested in, on this table as you exit, there's a little scan code, so you can scan that and get your information in. we would love for you to be a part of that group if that's something that would be helpful for you. The next thing is when Ellen told me that Angie was coming, author of The Big Dumb Invisible Dragon, I asked her if she could bring some copies. So in the next room as you exit, there is a table there. She is here. She said she'd be willing to give an autograph. So that is also here available tonight. I wanted to give a shout out, thank you, to Emily's Bakery. She made, now you guys, Emily's Bakery, Emily's my sister-in-law. When I say it's the best cookie you've ever eaten in your life, if you eat it and don't agree, like, I will fight you. It is the most amazing cookie. My husband begs for her to make them, and she was generous enough to make a large amount of cookies. So we have cookies and water. I'd love for you to be able to take time to get to know one another, ask questions, come and talk to our wonderful speakers. This sort of grief support group is so important. I think there's so many people that don't know which way to turn, and this is something that hopefully this is our first of many. We'd like to do it twice a year, and hopefully it just continues to grow as we reach out and get to know more people. So thank you so much for coming, and these flowers are for each of our speakers, so please take those. Ellen and Ganel-Lyn, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. And again, like I said, you're welcome to stay and mingle. This conference was filmed tonight, and it will be on our YouTube channel at Spring Creek Mortuary. So if there is somebody that you think that you could share this with that could benefit that wasn't able to come tonight, you're welcome to do so. You're always welcome to reach out to us. We'd love to be support for people. So thank you again so much for coming, and enjoy your evening. Thank you.